I'm aware that I'm drawn to modern titles that evoke a sense of nostalgia. I love it when games tap into that part of your brain that makes you forget reality, if only for a few hours, pulling you into another world for an adventure. The best thing about these retro releases is how the developers limit themselves to a specific set of tools, or even challenge their own development skills, to deliver a memorable experience to any players that are willing to try it. There's genuine power in conveying so much emotion, story, and gameplay without relying on the crutch of high-end graphics or flashy production values. Games from the PC Engine era make up some of my favorite, partially because they always had to work within strict hardware limitations. After first seeing Space Colony Studios' Stories from Soul, the Gundog, I knew immediately that this game was going to be on my radar. It takes on a more visual novel adventure structure, with player choices steering the narrative in distinct directions. On top of that, the 90s anime character designs are a huge draw for someone like me who adores this era's aesthetics. Still, I'd argue that this nostalgic art style is just the icing on the cake, because this is one sci-fi journey that I'm certain I won't be forgetting anytime soon. Stories from Soul, the Gundog begins by allowing you to name your protagonist, a soldier enlisted in the Solar War. On his very first mission, players witness the catastrophic defeat of his entire team right alongside him, all thanks to a jammed, inoperable mech. It's a pretty heavy way to open the story, immediately showing the brutality of interplanetary conflict and how this shapes the soldier's personal journey. He grapples with intense regret and PTSD conveyed through flashbacks that highlight his mental struggles that most of the people around him remain unaware of. Then we jump forward 4 years, finding ourselves in the shoes of the pilot, but this time as a security officer aboard a Jovian patrol ship. The crew is sent to investigate a mysterious signal in deep space, setting the stage for the rest of the adventure. It's ultimately the setup of a premise that's meant to be a routine recon mission, but of course things descend into chaos once a strange signal knocks out your ship's power. The events that follow hinge entirely on your actions. Everything you believe and every approach you take to problem solving is dictated by dialogue choices that almost feel like they've been pulled straight out of classic Cthulhu text adventures. Still, our hero isn't a blank slate. He has a tangible sense of duty that can either align with or push against player decisions. He also has a girlfriend named Cassandra who becomes a central plot device later on. More importantly, he has depth, a backstory of hardship, and strong motivations that make him feel remarkably human. A supporting cast gradually comes into focus as you meet the crew of the Gundog. While the cast is fairly large, not everyone gets enough screen time to leave a lasting impression or significantly change the course of the plot. Haru never really clicked with me, but felt like they only showed up for a few critical scenes in a particular route. The main character's motivations, fueled by duty or personal feelings, feel more solid, whereas many side characters tend to adapt their stances for the sake of a narrative flow. It's all a tricky balancing act, especially for such a small studio, and the end result is that this game feels like a stepping stone towards something more expansive. Still, it's a much needed first step that sets the tone for future installments. That is, if we're lucky to see more from this universe. During gameplay, you can freely explore the Gundog whenever you get the chance. As I mentioned, there's always a main objective, but you're also encouraged to check in on other characters and poke around the ship's corridors. At any given moment, you can move, look, use, talk, and manage your inventory. Look and use are almost interchangeable though. There were a few times when I would use look by accident, discover something interesting in the environment, and realize that I needed to use the use command immediately after. It's all straightforward, particularly with the mouse, and the game avoids the typical frustration of pixel hunting by highlighting larger characters in each scene. That old school approach is present, but it's handled in a way that respects your time. When it comes to explorable areas, the Gundog itself is pretty large, and there's additional places to investigate outside of your main vessel. Now, I won't spoil any major reveals here, but it's enough to say that exploring beyond the Gundog leads to memorable story beats. As hidden agendas emerge and startling realizations come to light, dialogue choices directly affect the items you can acquire and which sections of the ships, or other locations, can become accessible. One system I really appreciated is how the game highlights the item option when you actually need to use an item to progress. Fast travel is also available for easy movement around the ship, so you're not stuck clicking through every corridor when you just need to check one specific area or crewmate. Anytime you access the menu, you can tweak the visual presentation. Although I mostly stuck to full color, there's an option to switch to retro-inspired palettes if you're craving something more in line with older PC Engine or classic DOS-era aesthetics. There's also customizable text, which is great to see for reading difficulties or simply want a different font style. By and large, Stories from Seoul: The Gundog is a gorgeous game. The character designs each have that distinct 90s anime charm, and the pixel animations give me that same tingle I get from replaying old side-scroller shooters or RPGs on retro hardware. What truly enhances the experience is how the developers of Space Colony Studios clearly studied what makes these older titles so enthralling. The PC Engine was home to iconic shoot-'em-ups and niche RPGs that were forced to rely on creative visuals and interesting mechanics. Here it feels like the team behind this game took the spirit of the innovation and blended it with modern conventions. This bridging of classic design philosophy and contemporary storytelling results in something that feels both fresh and nostalgic. For instance, the game battle sequences, though mostly told through text and visual rather than direct action, still manage to capture the tension of piloting a mech in a dire circumstance. There is a pronounced sense of dread when your power systems go down, echoing that old school design where every resource is counted. It's also worth noting that the game's narrative doesn't shy away from heavier topics like PTSD, guilt, and the moral ambiguities of interplanetary warfare. While the classic PC Engine era rarely tackled such themes head-on, some cult favorites from the time did weave in surprisingly deep story elements. The game ultimately inherits that tradition of layering a more mature storyline beneath these pixel visuals. That level of emotional resonance ties back to what I love about nostalgic-driven games in the first place, if only as a reminder that a lower budget or smaller team doesn't mean that you can't create powerful storytelling moments. The various branching narratives that you can come across mean that you'll be able to replay sections to see different dialogue choices and how they affect both the relationships and the overarching plot. Cassandra's involvement, in particular, shifts based on how you choose to handle critical junctures. There are moments when the tension between duty and personal connection come to a head, and that conflict adds an extra layer of realism to this otherwise fantastical setting. I'm a big fan of visual novels that weave in genuine consequences for your decisions, rather than just providing superficial branching paths. Although some routes and endings aren't as fleshed out as I'd like, you can tell there's a strong foundation here. Exploring remains key throughout. Even though the adventure has a few hours of aimless wandering, there's enough space to make you feel like you're truly on board a massive ship. Small details like checking a console for logs or overhearing a crew member's gripe about the mission help sell the overall atmosphere. For me, that's where the game shines, fostering a sense of place. Each conversation and environment has the potential to reveal new layers of the story or subtle hints about what might be looming around the corner. Beyond this crew and the Gundog, there's a broader realm of deep space itself. One of the most haunting aspects of the game is how it leans into the unknown. At a certain point in the story, you realize you're dealing with something far bigger than a routine patrol or a mechanical glitch. The sense of cosmic dread, reminiscent of Lovecraftian influences, manifests in the hush of space, the cryptic signals, and the subtle horror of being powerless in the face of technology or entity that you can't fully understand. This, in turn, complements that earlier moment of Cthulhu-esque text adventure choices. It's all about teetering on the edge of sanity while you walk around and try to keep your crew alive. All things considered, Stories from Seoul: The Gundog is a standout indie release that marries modern narrative design with a delightful retro flair. Its memorable character designs and pixel animations consistently grew me deeper into the story. The pacing keeps you on your toes, especially once you realize how dire the stakes really are. I ended up appreciating every moment of this space adventure, and even now, as I'm recounting my experience, I wish there was another episode waiting for me in the wings. If Space Colony Studios continues to build on this foundation, expanding the lore, refining the branching paths, fleshing out the casts, or maybe even adding an autosave feature, I could see the Gundog becoming the start of a beloved series that does for visual novels what the PC Engine did for 16-bit gaming. Noisy Pixel is giving Stories from Seoul: The Gundog an 8.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth and subscribe to keep up with all our future content. Noisy Pixel.